and then we have individuals here. And maybe we want to understand what might lead to certain behaviors with respect to these things on the top here, or what influenced people's behaviors. And so we could, in this example, we could ask specifically about each of those behaviors, or maybe there's something else that we can measure about individuals that might guide their behaviors. So this little diagram with the arrows, that's what's referred to as the cognitive hierarchy. And it says that we have a core set of values that would be few in number, they're slow to change, they're centered for beliefs, and they would transcend situations, and they'd be typically held in common by a certain culture. But if they're transcend situations, it probably wouldn't be of much use to us in terms of resource management. They're not going to vary by people. But this next level up, value orientations, these value orientations are pattern and directions of basic beliefs that revolve around our values. And it's a strength as well as the pattern, or strength as well as the direction. And researchers said, okay, we might be able to measure something related to these value orientations that would be direct antecedents of our attitudes and norms, which would then predict our behaviors. And so if we could understand how people orient themselves towards an issue like wildlife, maybe that would predict behavior in a variety of situations. And then we wouldn't have to, ask everyone about every issue. We might have some information about how they would respond across a variety of issues. So the difference here is that we're not just trying to say, okay, how many people would support or oppose aerial shooting with wolves, but why might they support or oppose that? Is there something that we could predict about their behavior? And so this would be an example of an explanatory type of study if we were to test this theory of how these different levels of cognition lead to behaviors. So, any questions on those different types of studies?
When you're doing a study, then might you ask questions that sort of hit at different levels then?
Yeah.
In order to correlate?
So if you were testing, let's say we wanted to test this theory, we had, I had these different levels of, these different constructs here, and I'll explain that term in a second. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to measure this issue of value orientations. Then we'd have to measure the attitudes and norms, and then we'd have behavioral attention. So we'd have the section on the survey that would measure each of these different levels. And then we build our model and then test that through some sort of technique like path analysis or something, or structural equation modeling. And then we can test that with that big test.
I have a question about this. I was just looking at this and thinking of from the ecological perspective, the model of state factors in the ecosystem. And it's outlined in a similar way where you have these kind of slow variables and then fast variables, where the slow variables are like climate, soil, things like that, and the faster variables are more kind of localized processes like microbial mineralization or something like that. But and then lately, is when Chapin's been writing about this, then he often talks about some kind of threshold within there where, once the kind of the slower variables are starting to change and reach some kind of threshold behavior that kind of leads this on a different track, like changes the faster variables. So is there some kind of threshold in this concept, or not really?
Well, some researchers, like Ron Engelhardt, would say that the values would change at like a generational scale. So they would hypothesize that we would learn sort of our core set of values and then those orientations early in life, and they would be pretty slow to change through one's life, but they might change like on a generational scale. And then other factors might influence that as well, such as industrialization. So he's tracked this over time through a lot of different countries with that are correlated to GNP and things like that. And so he hypothesizes that as a country becomes wealthier, there'll be a shift in their values. Then people have taken that concept and look at how that would relate to, like specifically to wildlife. And it kind of pulls in some other concepts like post-materialist and materialist values. I don't know if you've heard those terms. In making this link between, okay, if there's this change in society that might occur, you know, generationally, or especially related to like income and other factors like that, would we see a corresponding change in how people would, like activities people would engage in with respect to wildlife? So, for example, the fish and game agencies that are concerned about, you know, declining participation in those sort of traditional activities, which also makes up a large portion of their revenue, the sale of hunting and fishing licenses. And so this theory's been applied to, you know, that situation. If there would be a change, would we see people moving away from consumptive activities to more like appreciative viewing type of activities? Then would that have implications for sort of agency structure and revenue, and how they might find themselves in the future? And so, I guess what I was trying to answer your question is, the threshold would probably be like at a generational level where we'd start to see changes in that. And, you know, the effects of that is we'd see maybe more people moving into urban areas from rural areas. And then this particular theory here, as it applies to wildlife, would say we'd see a decrease in utilitarian values associated with them. So does that answer your question? Anything else?
Yeah, but you're saying change may take a generation. But sometimes in situations where it comes to surprises or shocks, you know, things that may change in societies in a very short time.
Yeah, and I said that the theory said that. So I mean, that's what they're looking at. But if there would be, like, all of a sudden, if this recession was, you know, 10 times worse than it was, you know, maybe we'd be concerned about different things. So I think there could be probably some pretty drastic changes that might change things, but it might be pretty drastic. So it, I think I'll track some of these issues across quite a few different societies over a long period of time. And, you know, it seems like there's this trajectory towards what he calls his post-materialist values. So, but if, you know, we went through the Great Depression again, you know, maybe that would restructure things. Any other questions? So in terms of this issue of how to go about conducting survey research, the first thing we would need to do is get a clear handle of what we're measuring. And so the first step here would be that we would define the construct that we're trying to measure. So the construct being our beliefs about reality, or abstractions about reality. And it's called the construct. It was constructed in researchers' mind. So let me, no, I guess I'll start. So for example, resilience and adaptation. You know, that would be the construct. You know, it's something that we've constructed in our minds that we think this is something that we can explain about reality, that this concept is, and we'll define that in a second. But here's this issue of wildlife value orientation, sort of that one, that cognitive hierarchy that I had before. So wildlife value orientations, they'd be defined as a pattern of direction and intensity among a set of basic beliefs regarding wildlife. These basic beliefs being organized around a fundamental